Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TVS Nightline. I'm Muhammad Yusuf, and let us begin with our top story. All members of the State Assembly from Gabungan Parti Sarawak GPS are urged to be fully committed in serving the people as the party was given a bigger mandate during the previous state election. The Chief Whip of GPS, Datuk Sri Fadilah Yusuf, stated that Sarawakians have chosen GPS because of its ability to give Sarawak the development it deserves with no ulterior motive. Fadilah also stated that the party's win has proven that Sarawakians have reached a level of maturity when it comes to deciding who should be ruling the state, which is also based on track records of their respective state assemblymen. He then reminded GPS Member of Parliament to work harder if they aspire to win during the upcoming general elections, which is slated to take place next year. A team comprising of several state assemblymen or ADUN from Gabungan Parti Sarawak GPS will be established to catalyse SIBU'S development. 4 out of 5 seats in SIBU were taken over by GPS, and those representing these seats will be recruited into the Dream Team as described by Nangkas ADUN Dr. Anwar Rabai. They even held a meeting recently to discuss the matter further. Anwar, who is also the Vice President of Parti Pusaka Bumiputra Bersatu PBB, disclosed that one of the main issues discussed during the meeting was to ensure that the possibility of SIBU'S flood can be addressed effectively by collaborating with Sarawak's Drainage and Irrigation Department DID. Among other things that were discussed touched on issues relating to housing and public transport. The 12th state election saw GPS's success in defending the Nangka seat whilst winning Bukit Asik, Dudong and Palawan, but was unable to win the Bawang Asan seat. Prior to the elections, Anwar helmed 2 ministerial positions in the state cabinet as the Assistant Minister for Education and Technological Research and the Assistant Minister for Housing and Public Health. Now, the public are reminded to not panic following the spread of the Omicron variant. A better resolve is to practice good hygiene and be more cautious of surrounding to stop the virus from spreading wider, as it is more contagious than the Delta variant. However, former advisor for the Sarawak Disaster Management Committee SDMC, Datuk Sri Dr. Sim Kui Hian, disclosed that the infection caused by the Omicron variant is not as severe when compared to the Delta's infection. He urged the people to always practice social distancing and all other mandatory SOPs, such as wearing a face mask, and to get their COVID vaccine if they have yet to do so. Elaborating further, Sim disclosed that the Omicron variant arrived in Sarawak earlier than expected following the reopening of the country's and state's borders. 5 cases have been detected in Sarawak, and the most recent case involved a 38-year-old man who is a citizen of China and tested positive for the Omicron variant on December 23. According to Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin, the man has been working for a construction company in Sarawak for 3 years and possibly caught the virus via local transmission. Now on to the daily COVID update. Sarawak recorded 24 new COVID infections today. It is a slight decrease from yesterday's cases, which stands at 27 cases. According to the Sarawak Disaster Management Committee SDMC, 11 cases were classified in Category 1, while 13 cases were classified into Category 2, where individuals indicated minor symptoms such as mild fever, coughs, and common cold. As of today, the cumulative COVID-19 cases in Sarawak stands at 252,199 cases. Kuching recorded the highest with 8 cases, followed by Sibu with 6 cases, Lawas 5, Sarike 2, while Miri, Kapit, and Tatau recorded 1 case respectively. Other districts did not record any infections, and at the same time, SDMC disclosed that no death or cluster was recorded. The Ministry of Education MOE will assess if any school should postpone the start of the 3rd term in 2021 to 2022 due to the severity of the floods. Before making any decision on the matter, MOE is currently evaluating the damage of school infrastructures, including computers, furniture, and textbooks. Senior Education Minister Datuk Dr. Radzi Jidin stated that school sessions would not be postponed. However, his ministry will be formulating a proper plan to resolve the issue of schools affected by the floods. To solve the issue, he added that MOE will be looking at each complication on a case-by-case basis to come up with the most effective solution. At the same time, he appealed to schools to work together with the State Education Department and the District Education Department by listing out their needs, such as furnitures and textbooks, to facilitate aid distribution. Earlier, Radzi announced that the third term 2021 to 2022 school session, which was supposed to begin on January 2, 2022 for Group A and January 3, 2022 for Group B, had to be postponed by a week because of the floods. He said states in Group A, comprising Johor, Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu, will begin school on January 9, and Group B, comprising of Melaka, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, Perlis, Penang, Sabah, Sarawak, Selangor, Federal Territories of Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya and Labuan on January 10. Radzi added that the MOE would still implement a rotation system for student attendance when the school opens, and the details would be announced soon. Now, following the postponement announcement, the president of Sarawak Teachers Union STU, Adam Prakash, welcomes the decision to postpone the school reopening, as there are teachers who were also affected by the flood disaster that affected several states throughout Malaysia.
Tidak kurang juga murid-murid, ya, ramai juga telah terkesan, dan banyak buku dan pakaian telah dimusnahkan dalam banjir tersebut. STU berharap semua ibu bapa menyambut baik tindakan ini dan memberi peluang agar, ya, pihak yang berkaitan, pihak sekolah boleh membuat persediaan yang lebih baik untuk menyambut kembalinya pelajar-pelajar ke sekolah nanti.
Adam hopes that teachers and students will be able to be patient while waiting for schools to reopen and the home-based learning session PDPR to resume. He also hopes that parents continue to provide moral support and motivation to their children. Now, a warning was announced recently by the Malaysian Meteorological Department, or Met Malaysia, as heavy downpour continues in the state, specifically from December 27 to December 31. From TVS's survey, many are prepared to face a possible flash flood that could affect flood-prone area across Sarawak. For Wan Leet, a resident from Kampong Pinang, Jawa, bracing themselves for the flood is an annual routine for himself and his family, and he hopes that the government will be able to assist in terms of a more immaculate preparation.
Kami di Kampung Pinang, Jawa tu hampir setiap tahun lah yang akan terima hujan lebat. So kami orang rumah hinek kami lah, kami selalu nolong lah. Kami orang akan sedia lah mau naik di padit ke pendan nak. So orang get ready lah. So untuk orang mohap juga kerajaan nolong juga lah sebagai preparation contoh kedak KL lah, perlu prepare awal pendah lah. Kami apa macamnya lah.
Another resident of Kampong Pinang, Jawa, Ahmad Zen, hopes that there will be help from the relevant authority with cleaning up after the flood recedes.
Sebenarnya keperluan untuk banjir teknya semestinya dari segi kewangan lah. Mungkin dari segi untuk preparation selepas banjir. Contohnya dah banjir tak nak. Jadi maybe dapat beri peruntukan untuk beri kedak water jet ke apakah. Sebab semua orang boleh mampu untuk memiliki water jet lah. Jadi dari segi water jet ke, cangkul ke, dari segi kedak ya lah. Dari segi before banjir ya, diharap kedak dapat beri kedak bata ke apakah. Selalu mun kita nak letak kedak washing machine atas bata nak. Semua orang dapat mampu beli bata ya bah. Mun ada orang mampu lah. Mun saya dah mampu lah.
Meanwhile, for Hanif Azhan, his main concern is the unpredictable weather that has occurred throughout the whole year. Even so, he believes that the government will be able to rise to the occasion and address the many concerns relating to the flash flood, which will greatly affect the lives of many Sarawakian.
Biasanya kami tiap tahun lah akan bersedia untuk banjir kerana setiap hujung tahun memang tahu hujan lebat lah. Tapi tahun tu macam membimbangkan sikit lah. Jadi masih bersedia macam sama, cuma lebih berhati-hati lah. Mohon boleh kerajaan membantu sangat baiklah untuk rakyat. Memang harapan setiap rakyat lah rasanya.
Last Friday, Met Malaysia have issued a warning of a continuous heavy downpour related to the monsoon surge. A monsoon surge involves cold winds from Siberia that results in strong winds and rough conditions in the South China Sea. On to some crime update. A man in his 20s was killed in a single vehicle crash along Jalan Tanjung Kidurong after he reportedly lost control of his vehicle and hit a tree. The Bintulu Fire and Rescue Department Bomba was alerted at about 9:16 p.m. The Bintulu Bomba Zone Chief Wan Kamarudin Wan Ahmad said the deceased, identified as Justin Andy Minggu, was pronounced dead at the scene by a medical officer. 6 personnel were dispatched to the scene and they managed to extricate the trapped victim from the wreckage. The victim's body was then handed over to the police for further action. Residents of Jakarta Town woke up to a fright on Sunday morning at the sight of a 5-meter-long crocodile resting along the town's riverbank. The crocodile was first spotted by local residents at around 9:45 a.m. before it was informed to the Fire and Rescue Department, Bomba. While the reptile did not behave aggressively, it took the Bomba team almost an hour to chase away the crocodile back to the river. According to Bomba Sarike Chief Mahmudin Narudin, a 9-person team was mobilized to the location after receiving the call.
Bilik Kawalan Balai Bomba Negara Masrike menerima panggilan dari orang awam yang melapor ada seekor buaya di alamat Jalan Jakar, Sarike pada jam 09.50 pagi. Anggaran panjang buaya tersebut lebih kurang 5 meter. Operasi yang diketahui oleh PBK 2 Mijan Pamin dengan kekuatan anggota seramai 9 anggota telah bergegas ke tempat kejadian.
The operation was also assisted by the Malaysian Civil Defence Force APM Sarike. At the same time, no injuries were reported during the operation.
Disebabkan buaya tersebut sukar ditangkap dan mungkin akan bertindak ganas semasa operasi penangkapan. Demi keselamatan penduduk di kawasan berkenaan, kita berjaya menghalau buaya tersebut ke lokasi sungai yang berhampiran. Kita sentiasa menasihatkan kepada semua penduduk supaya sentiasa berwaspada semasa melakukan aktiviti di air.
Welcome back to TVS Nightline. Now, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob paid a visit to flood-affected regions in Hulu Langat today. He arrived at 9:50 a.m. and proceeded to several residences to meet the owners who were busy cleaning up their homes, which had been inundated earlier this week by the floods. Before going to several other locations where the gotong royong were held to clean up the affected areas, the Prime Minister met with volunteers cleaning who was in the midst of cleaning Surau Al Munir, which sheltered surrounding residents who had climbed to its roof before help arrived. The gotong royong involved local residents, volunteers, non-governmental organizations, and members of the security forces. Ismail Sabri then visited Kampong Dusun Tua and was joined by Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Ekril Sani Abdullah Sani and Malaysian Armed Forces MAF Chief General Tan Sri Effendi Buang. On the other hand, Ismail Sabri stated that the government has agreed to set up a special task force to handle post-flood activities and to prepare for the second wave of floods. He said the task force would be chaired by the Chief Secretary to the government, Tan Sri Muhammad Zuki Ali. The Prime Minister expressed that the post-flood work needs proper coordination and must not be delayed, especially when delivering assistance to flood victims. The task force will comprise of the Malaysian Armed Forces MAF and other relevant agencies would hold their first meeting as early as tomorrow. Meanwhile, Ismail Sabri said among matters to be discussed and decided by the task force would be on the coordination of the implementation of process involved in the cleaning of houses and buildings that were affected by the floods and on the mechanism to ensure the Bantuan Wang Ehsan BWI could be channeled to the victims fast. He said the task force would also find a resolution for solid waste management as a result of the destruction caused by the floods. He added that the government, through the Environment and Water Ministry, CASA, had provided a mobile incinerator that could dispose of solid waste from its original position without polluting the environment. Apart from that, he said the government have also collected data on the total losses caused by the floods in Selangor. In related news, disaster management committees at state and district levels have been instructed to coordinate post-flood activities in the flood-affected areas. According to the National Disaster Management Agency, NADMA, Director General Dato' Aminuddin Hasim, the coordination of post-flood activities will include discussions with all other federal agencies as the flood has begun to recede in several states and districts. He also said that other post-floods initiatives, which is crucial to be implemented, are assisting with the cleaning of homes, public places and schools used as temporary relief centers, as well as the restoration of essential services. Aminuddin added that disaster management committees in Johor, Sabah and Sarawak have been instructed to be on alert after the Meteorological Department issued a continuous heavy rain warning, in addition to taking preventive measures by opening flood operation control centers. Commenting further, he said each state control center have also been instructed to submit reports for areas still experiencing floods and those where floods have receded, as well as to inform the Department of Irrigation and Drainage DID of any need for the use of pumps for water removal operations in stagnant flood areas. Now, NADMA has ordered the State Disaster Management Committee, JPBN of Sarawak, Sabah and Johor to immediately activate their Disaster Operations Control Center or PKOB. According to the Malaysian Meteorological Department, Met Malaysia forecast, continuous rain is expected in the eastern part of Sabah from December 27 to January 2, western part of Sarawak from December 29 to December 31, and in Johor, Pahang, Terengganu and Kelantan from December 30 to January 2. In a statement, the National Disaster Control Center, NDCC, has already issued a National Disaster Operations Preparedness Notice to the states involved to be prepared. State PKOBs are also urged to coordinate assistance for the flood victims, especially with supplies of perishable food, to avoid wastage. NADMA also announced that flood victims could still obtain food and take shelter at relief centers for a period of 3 days while waiting for the cleaning up of their homes to be completed. Similarly, NADMA also asked the PKOB for Terengganu, Kelantan and Pahang to be prepared for possible floods as continuous rain is expected between December 30 to January 1, 2022. Now on to the national COVID update. Over 22 million individuals, or 97.5% of the adult population in the country, have completed their COVID-19 vaccination as of 11:59 p.m. on Saturday. And based on the Health Ministry's COVID Now website, over 23 million individuals, or 98.8% of the group, have received at least one dose of the vaccine. As for the adolescent population aged between 12 and 17, over 2 million individuals, or 87.2% of the group, have completed their vaccination, while over 2.8 million, or 90.2%, have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Meanwhile, with over 25,000 doses of the vaccine dispensed yesterday, 23,698 were booster doses. The remainder of the number, in which 1,244 are second dose and 515 are the first dose. This brings the cumulative number of vaccine doses administered under the National COVID-19 Immunization Program, or PIC, as of yesterday to 56,748,229 doses, including 5,389,370 booster doses. Now, the My Sejahtera app has been updated with a new function called My Sejahtera Trace, or My SJ Trace, which allows easier close contact tracing with those who tested positive for COVID-19. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said the application can be downloaded and updated starting today. In his latest Twitter post, Khairi said that the My SJ Trace uses Bluetooth technology to track close contacts that also use the same feature. The feature will provide live information on the number of interactions with other users, provided that their My SJ Trace is activated. Additionally, this feature has been sent simultaneously to Google, Apple, and Huawei. According to a joint statement by the Science, Technology and Innovation Ministry, or MOSTI, and the Health Ministry, MOH, the My SJ Trace function was developed to fulfill the demands of the Find, Trace, Test, Isolate and Support FTTIS program, one of the monitoring programs by the MOH to prevent and control the spread of COVID-19. To ensure the effectiveness of the feature, users are required to activate their Bluetooth on their devices at all times. This is because when a person is confirmed to be positive for COVID-19, a notification will appear through My Sejahtera to request approval for the sharing of any close contact information that was detected.
Listen carefully.
Thank you for staying with me on TVS Nightline. Now on to some global update. More than 30 people, including women and children, were killed and their bodies burned in Myanmar's conflict-torn Kaya state. Photos and footage taken showed charred bodies on burnt-out truck beds, which Karenni human rights group said were internally displaced people killed by junta soldiers near Moso village in Pruso town. According to the state media, the Myanmar military said it had shot and killed an unspecified number of terrorists with weapons from the opposition armed forces in the village. The people were in 7 vehicles and did not stop for the military. The military could not be immediately reached for comment. Now, protesters opposed to military rule have reached the vicinity of the presidential palace in the capital of Khartoum for the second time in a week, despite heavy tear gas and communications blackout. Sudanese security forces had fired tear gas to disperse the crowds on the 10th day of major demonstrations since the October 25th coup. Internet services were disrupted in the capital, Khartoum, and locals were unable to make or receive domestic calls on Saturday, December 25th, while soldiers and rapid support forces blocked roads leading to bridges linking Khartoum with Omdurman. Meanwhile, in neighboring Omdurman, security forces also fired tear gas at protesters around 2 kilometers away from a bridge connecting the city to central Khartoum. Protests have continued even after Abdallah Hamdok was reinstated as prime minister last month.
الشارع رافض، يعني انت حتحكم منو؟ يعني الشارع ما عايزك، انت حتحكم منو؟ كل عايزين يحكموا بالقوه بالغمع بالقوه، لكن الشارع يعني بنموت حيموت والناس الشارع اخذ كلمته واخذ غرامه بيته حيموت يا اما عيشه بعيسى ويا اما موت.
A week ago, demonstrators managed to begin a sit-in at the gates of the palace, but on Saturday they were met with rows of security forces. They have demanded that the military has no role in government during a transition to free elections.
التسانات الأمنية والاستعدادات وتكفيل الكباري والمعابر بالحاويات وبأرتان من الجنود والقوات المدججة بالأسلحة إلا إنه إرادة الشعب السوداني كانت قادرة على إنها تكسر الطوق الأمني والعسكري في محيط القصر الجمهوري وتنتزع حقها في التعبير عن الراية المعلن عبر لجان المقاومة في الوصول للقصر الجمهوري عنوة واقتدارا في هذا اليوم.
Now, the world's largest and most powerful space telescope has rocketed away on a high-stake quest to behold light from the first stars and galaxy and scour the universe for hints of life. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope soared from French Guiana on South America's northeastern coast, riding a European Ariane rocket at around 7:20 a.m. Its flight to orbit lasted just under half an hour, with a signal confirming a successful outcome picked up by a ground antenna at Malindi in Kenya. The $10 billion observatory is named after James Webb, who headed NASA during the early 1960s when the U.S. was headed toward sending men to the moon for the first time. According to the space agency, its revolutionary technology gives it the ability to explore every phase of the cosmic history from within our solar system to the most distant observable galaxies in the early universe and everything in between. The Webb mission, seen as the successor to the aging Hubble Space Telescope, is also partnered with the European Space Agency ESA and the Canadian Space Agency. And that's all the time we have for tonight's TVS Nightline. I'm Yusuf. Take care and good night.